G'day and welcome to the third episode of Soundz Unleashed, and thanks for joining us. I'm Plummo and I'm your host of Soundz Unleashed, a podcast that will explore the indie music and audio production scene in Australia and the globe. The subject of today's podcast is the ghost track, uncovering the hidden hands of session musicians behind indie music. Behind every indie anthem and rising star there's a hidden force, the session musician. In episode 3, we're pulling back the curtain on the unsung heroes of the indie music scene. Whether you're an industry professional looking to elevate your productions, or an aspiring artist building your sound, this deep dive into the world of session musicians will give you the insight, inspiration, and insider tips you won't hear anywhere else. In this episode, we're cracking open the underground world of session players in the indie music scene. In our first segment, we discuss the advantages, disadvantages, and issues that affect session musicians in the current music industry. We look at the evolving side of session musos, the common types of engagements available, why session work is crucial to the indie music pipeline, and creative endeavours in general. We look at the best practices for aspiring session musicians who have built or are building their careers without needing the limelight of the fame and fortune, and discuss their importance to the music industry ecosystem. In our second segment, we'll be joined by my son Dylan Plumridge, a session keyboard player, discussing some of the topics around session work and the experiences he has had in his short career in the indie music industry. Finally, we introduce our listeners to Ben Harris, an emerging solo pop artist out of Sydney, New South Wales, who has recently released his debut EP, Homesick. So welcome to our discussion on session musicians. The indie music industry has grown significantly over the last 2 decades. It's characterised by its do-it-yourself ethos, the artistic freedom of individuals, and the avoidance of major record labels that somewhat give a bit of a raw deal. In this landscape, though, session musicians basically hire professionals who perform in recordings or live performances without being permanent parts of that particular band or group, and they play a crucial yet often under-recognised role. The role itself of a session muso, has traditionally been hired hands for the major labels, but today it's a little bit different. Today, it's they're creative collaborators with other artists, they're project-based specialists or instrumentalists, or they're just freelance entrepreneurs running their own businesses, enhancing the indie music place. They work directly with self-managed artists and producers, other small labels such as Soundz. And digital-first teams, often across remote platforms and even decentralised remote setups. And we will have a chat to one of Soundz friends later about how they do their particular remote recording. In the indie music world, where artists are often self-funded or crowd-funded, the session musician's role becomes more fluid. Common engagements performed by session musos include studio recording, tracking live instrumental vocals for EPs, LPs or singles with other artists, specific instrumentals, recording a specific instrument part, solo or vocal parts for a project or harmonies, live support. They might be filling out band rosters for tours, festivals or one-offs when a regular guitarist or regular keyboard player can't be found. They actually get involved in creative development, so co-writing and co-arranging, especially for solo artists. They often can write the song, but they can't write the specific part for that particular instrument. And they do remote work, delivering stems via platforms like SoundBetter, Air Gigs, or other private agreements. In particular, and we'll talk to Dylan later about a CD that he did some recordings on, either in the studio or via remote, to support another artist who he's had nothing else to do with since. It was just an opportunity that came up, and he's done that. So what are the advantages really of being a session musician in the industry then? You get creative freedom and variety. You work with diverse artists across genres, and that offers a rich creative stimulation experience for most independent artists and session musos, where they just want to play their particular role without the worry about marketing it all and getting it out there. But indie artists often blur genre boundaries as well, right? So you get to do some experimentation. You give session players a chance to contribute unique sounds and ideas. For the session muso of today, you get flexibility and independence. Session work provides the opportunity to choose your own projects, manage your own schedule, and avoid the obligations of a long-term band membership requiring extensive rehearsals, etc. So for musicians who prefer freelance work, this can be a significant perk for them. That doesn't negate that a lot and probably all session musos have a permanent band membership, with another group. The thing about session muso work, though, expanding network and visibility is a big thing, right? The more frequent collaborations that you can do across multiple projects helps to build your strong network in the indie music scene, right? Word of mouth is key. Reputation's critical for getting ongoing work, and being involved in multiple projects increases your exposure right across the industry. As a session muso, given you're a freelance entrepreneur, you need to portfolio build. So every session that you add, you can put into your resume, your musician's resume. It allows you to showcase your versatility and your professionalism. High quality recordings and live performance become valuable assets for future gigs and collaborations with both domestic and potentially international artists. A big part of this, though, is also the entry into a community, right? So despite its fragmented nature or decentralised nature, the indie scene often fosters close-knit communities, right? A reliable session musician can become a go-to collaborator in these circles, creating a sense of belonging in that particular sphere. So if you're known as a really good session muso, easy to work with, you know your craft well, you'll keep getting callbacks. So why does session work matter to the indie ecosystem? Well, if you're an artist or a producer, you get access to expertise. You gain high-level skills without the long-term commitment of permanent band memberships. Also cost benefits. You also get a fresh perspective. So session players can inject creativity that pushes a track beyond its original vision of the writing artist. You get efficiency. Experienced session musos can often complete takes a lot faster with fewer revisions and less trouble because they've been experienced in doing that. They complete tasks faster. Scalability is another thing. So artists can scale up for tools or studio needs without restructuring the band or the brand, right? You can swap them in and out if you need to. Maybe even particular locations where some can't travel. Might be an overseas thing, it might be an interstate thing. For the actual session musician, though, if we look at them, you get creative variety. You get constant exposure to different genres, workflows and people. And the more you do that, the better your networking will be, the more requests you'll get, and the more, obviously, more cash and money will come into you as a business. And that's essentially what you are. You get career flexibility. So, autonomy in choosing the project styles and collaborators. So if you don't want to do a particular project because it doesn't fit with your personal ethics or whatever, you've got the ability to do that. You're not stuck in a band where it's getting driven in a direction that you're not happy with. You get brand expansion. So you work across multiple releases, your name builds recognition, credibility as a particular artist or a particular instrumentalist, then that brand recognition expansion is good for your career. And revenue streams, well, there's opportunities in recording, live performance, sync licensing, all with proper agreements, of course. You need these agreements. Gone are the days of having a gentleman's agreement, and most of these things you need to have something written down. So whilst they're the advantages of it, what are the disadvantages of being a session muso if we look at that for a little bit? Financial instability is one of them. Many indie artists operate on shoestring budgets, and session work may be unpaid or underpaid. And that's always a problem for a professional musician who's done their training and is trying to grow in the market. Especially for newer or lesser known musicians, the long-term financial stability is often difficult to maintain, but you need to start somewhere. But you also need to not sell your skills short, right? So there's no point doing unpaid work forever just to build the brand. I mean, you need to have some sort of income to keep your music career going. You get lack of recognition and credit, and sometimes session musicians frequently remain uncredited or undercredited in indie releases. The producer always gets there, the composer, the lyricist always gets there, but the session musos not always credited. And this anonymity can hinder your career growth, especially when trying to attract more prominent clients or labels or artists to work with you. You get absence of royalties and rights. Without the proper contracts, session musicians often relinquish, and they don't even realise it, the royalties and ownership rights. So while some indie artists are transparent and fair, others may neglect to compensate session players beyond their initial fees. Inconsistent work and scheduling stress. Work in the session music industry can be irregular, right, with periods of high demand followed by lulls. You need to manage those multiple short-term commitments, and it can lead to burnout and scheduling conflicts. So you need to really have good time management skills. You need to probably have a second of income source of income, because as a session muso, unless you're really well domestically and internationally recognised, there's going to be periods there where you're not going to have any work in the music industry. So you need to fill that gap. You'll have limited creative control, right? So whilst many indie projects and artists welcome direct input from session musos, ultimately they're there to execute someone else's vision. So you need to play it the way that the artist intended and wants it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't creatively contribute, but it may be minimised or altered and during post-production, without that musician's input. You really do need to work with that particular artist, find out what their vision is for their song, and work to that sort of style. So what are the practical considerations for success, right? You need to build a brand and online presence. You need to maintain a strong online portfolio. So you need to get short clips on Instagram and TikTok and SoundCloud, etc., to attract the clients, right? You need testimonials and demo reels, and videos can enhance your credibility of you actually playing. If you don't foster that, no one knows how good you are as a session musician. So you need to really work on that good marketing campaign. You need to negotiate fair pay and credit. All right. So learn to navigate contracts and copyright law, and fair compensation is crucial, right? Musicians should aim to establish written agreements. Doesn't matter how small you are. You need to have something in writing about what you're going to provide as a service and what the payment conditions are. And it may be some portion of recording royalty. It may be a initial, upfront sum payment for it, and nothing else. But get it written down and get it established, right? Especially if there's publishing splits, etc. And clarify credit terms before you begin the project, right? Agree with them whether you're going to be credited or you're not going to be credited, and get that written down, and have that networking relationship with the artist. Versatility and skill development. Be proficient across multiple instruments if you can. That enhances your ability to act as a session muso. So if you play to multiple instruments or genres, it increases your marketability. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean different instruments, but keyboards versus the guitar versus a bass guitar or something or other. You might be good at all three of those. Market yourself on that basis. You probably, as a session player, should stay current with software like Logic Pro, Pro Tools, and Ableton, because if you're doing remote session work and you're creating a stem for somebody, you need to be able to use those tools and at least get the raw data down there before it goes to the producer. Professionalism and communication, not a music thing, but a very good business and networking thing. Okay, you need reliability. You need to be reliable. You need to be responsive. You need to communicate, and you need the ability to collaborate respectively is just as important as your musical talent. Okay, good communication fosters the repeat work and strong recommendations if you're easy to work with and you're reliable and get the job done. So, what are the best practices for professionals and artists, for aspiring session musicians? Try to build a niche first. Excel in one style or instrument to develop a strong portfolio before branching out into others. Like I said, you need to create a digital presence. So your demo reels, your testimonials, your credits should live on a personal site or platforms, like Sound Better or LinkedIn or any of those, Instagram. Understand the music law, right? Just the basics. No one expects you to be a recording lawyer or anything like that, but understand what you're actually getting, what you're getting involved with, what the requirements are. Maintain your gear and punctuality. Professionalism is extremely important, so make sure you've got everything you need and that you've practiced or rehearsed or whatever you need to do to do that particular component. Maybe invest in home recording setups. A decent remote setup increases your hireability tenfold if you can just play a raw stem for an album and send it up into the production. That will increase it, and you don't need to you go to a studio for that. For any artists and producers that are considering hiring, session musician talent, clarify those expectations up front. The budget, the timeline, the file formats, any revisions, creative limits must be spelled out early and in detail. Use contracts, even if it's just the email type one, even if it's informal. You need something in writing, like we were saying, so it avoids misunderstandings later on down the track. Most people in music industry are legitimately interested in their music, and they're not out to shortchange anybody. But you need to make sure that you're covered. Right? Be transparent about what you're going to do as an artist with your session musicians. What is the credit and compensation if the song takes off, and think long term. Right, a great session musician might later become a co-writer, a touring partner, or a producer for you, and you want to make sure that you keep that and maintain that relationship. In terms of the future of session work in indie music, home studios are coming on, and online collaboration tools are making it easier, right? So the democratization of music production is easier to do from home now. It's expanded opportunities for remote session work. So, all these online formats where you can request somebody to play a particular instrument or, create you a design or whatever, they can be all done now a hell of a lot easier than normally. So you can get hired as a session musician globally if you get the reputation. So use those sources. The only thing I'd say at the same time, artificial intelligence and virtual instruments pose some challenges for session musicians. I'm not a fan of artificial made music. I'm just not. I know there's probably a particular place for it, but I'm not a fan of that, and I think that really damages the local indie music industry. And hopefully most artists will opt for normal human musicians than synthesized parts created by artificial intelligence. We're not talking about using synths on a keyboard. That's still played by a session musician. We're talking about the total creation of something from an AI engine. You still want the authenticity and the nuance of live performance, and that remains highly valued in indie circles. So what are market trends shaping the session work? Remote collaboration, as I said, it was massively accelerated during the pandemic, and remote tracking is now pretty much a standard practice. Later on, we'll talk to Stuart Robertson again about some of the stuff that he does remotely with a friend of his out of Orange, so they work together on those things. You've got do-it-yourself and lo-fi production stuff. Session musicians can elevate bedroom recordings to radio-ready quality, essentially these days. If it takes off, it can be re-recorded, of course, in a proper studio and with the proper production. Emerging tools like AI drums, virtual strings are accessible, but they rarely match that human feel. You can't, that's preserving a key advantage for live playing. The computers will never do it and never have that nuance, in my view, that matches that human feel. And global freelancing with time zones and not having to be in the same location to record, the geographies are no longer limiting. So session musicians now serve a global indie network, not just at home. For my recommendations, I guess, for the stakeholders in the session music game, for managers and labels, maintain a vetted roster of reliable session musos. Once you've found your good session musos, keep them on the roster, right? Give them regular work where their skills fit. That'll make their lives easier, and you'll get quality product, and you know what you're getting. Bundle session player costs into production budgets from the start. Right? You're going to use it, so make sure you allocate appropriate budgets for the production of the song. For indie artists, treat session musicians as collaborators, not just vendors. Right? If you do just the supply and demand vendor thing, you're not going to have that relationship. You're not going to have the network. And it's not going to turn out as well as it will be if you're, your collaborators and friends. Prioritize that communication and clarity, especially if you're doing it remotely. It's going to take multiple sessions. Make sure you tell the session musician exactly what you're going for, what your vision is for this particular part in the song, and design with them. They are experts in their field of instrument or vocal range or whatever it might be. You need to take their guidance as well as impart your knowledge on what you see as the songwriter. For session musos, mate, always keep your contracts, your stems, and your session notes organised. Right, talk to the artist before you start laying down anything, and be proactive about marketing and follow-ups. So, in conclusion for this segment, being a session muso in the indie music industry is a dynamic, rewarding yet challenging career path. It offers artistic variety and community involvement, but often comes with a financial and professional uncertainty. Success in the field depends on a blend of musicianship, adaptability, definitely business acumen, and interpersonal skills like communication. As the indie scene continues to evolve, session musicians who can position themselves as collaborative, creative, and reliable professionals will always remain indispensable to its growth and diversity. This episode of Soundz Unleashed is proudly brought to you by Hazy's Wood, a boutique woodworking studio right here in Sydney. They craft beautifully turned pens and custom wooden furniture, all made with passion and precision. For unique handmade pieces that impress and inspire, check out Hazy's Wood, where artistry meets timber. Hazy's Wood can be found on Instagram and Facebook, and the links will be provided in the podcast upload. Soundz Unleashed is pleased to be joined today by an up-and-coming session musician and keyboardist, Mr. Dylan Plumridge from Dylan James Music. Based in Sydney, Dylan is a versatile keyboard maestro behind Dylan James Music. As a sought-after session keyboardist, he brings depth and flair to each performance and project. Dylan is also a key member of Aphrodisiac, a dynamic five-piece indie rock band known for their punchy riffs, laid-back grooves, and unforgettable high-energy live shows. Dylan also plays keyboard for Daniel Aranda in the Midnight Pulse and up-and-coming artist Farah Dice. He's also recorded session gigs for home-based artists upon request. Welcome to the show, Dylan, and great that you're able to join us, mate. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with us. So today we're on the topic of the unsung heroes of indie music, the session musician. And I know that you've worked and continue to work as a session muso, collaborating with various artists and recording projects, including with Aphrodisiac. But first, I'm sure our listeners would be interested to get to know a little bit more about you, and tell us how initially you got into music, what influences you, and what led you to doing session music work.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. It's an honour to be here. A bit about me. I'm a session musician. I mostly play keyboards, play some bass guitar at a similar level, and do backing vocals when people ask nicely. What got me into music originally, musical influences from family, I think, kept me going through music. I started playing a piano when I was 5. And then once I hit sort of mid-high school, I decided that music was where I was going to go. Yeah, music was where I was going to go with my career. And from there, I then went on to study music at a tertiary level, and now I'm working as a session musician. Yeah.
So tell us about what's your favourite session project you've done, and how did you end up doing that one?
Favourite session project? A rather interesting one was the first full cover show I did in Crow's Nest in Sydney. It was 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Horrific hours, but that's pretty standard hours for a session muso. And because it was my first time, I was a little bit worried, fresh out of uni, and made a whole bunch of mistakes all the way through. Couldn't catch solos, forgot a solo for one of the songs at the end. And
I believe I was at that gig.
You were, yes. And it was a bit of a crash and burn, at least in my mind, but it taught me a heck of a lot. But the prep for that gig as well was a nightmare. I wrote charts for 45 songs. I think we played the first set out of 3, and then 3 songs into the second set, and we just took requests all night, so half of it was stuff I didn't even know anyway. But yeah, learned a lot about improvisation.
I might be biased, but it didn't sound that bad. Like, to the actual punter out there sitting in the pub, I was sitting there, had my beer in my hand. It did not sound like he made any mistake. So I think in your mind it was worse than what it actually was.
Yeah, it's a big thing that I think happens to a lot of people, not just musicians. It's what do you call it? Imposter syndrome, I think. Just getting in your own head about, I've done a worse job than I wanted to. But yeah, it probably didn't sound that bad, even though I can pick out all the mistakes that I did, and all the drunk people dancing around at midnight probably had no idea anyway. So
no, that's it.
It's all right.
So you spoke about you had to write 45 charts for that gig, that first session gig. How do you go about charting out your parts? Like, what do you do to create the chart? Yeah,
well, I have an iPad with, it just has one function. One function is just to do this charting for me for music. There's an app called iReal Pro. It's sort of built around the idea is that it's based on the real book. That's based for like in jazz charts and things like that, to have standards instead of carrying around an actual real book with you. It's a massive, thick, kind of textbook looking thing. And you can add as many as you want and digitize it, whatever. And I use it to just chart everything that I have. And I don't have to do that. There's a lot of session musicians out there that will just memorize things. But what you'll find is, or at least what I think would be, I'd memorize however many songs for a gig, and then do a couple more gigs, a couple of weeks go by, and some of those songs I'd probably forget. Some of them you end up remembering forever because you just play them 100 million times. But I like having that database there of charts, because if I don't play a song for 3 years and then it pops up again, I'm not having to relearn it. I can just go back to the chart that I wrote. And it's actually been really useful as of late of giving charts to other people. The other session musicians that message me, like that are on the same gig, and go, "Oh crap, I'm stuck. Can you just give me a chart?"
And you do a lot of improv as well in some of these gigs, right? So everything wouldn't be just be you know the basics of your music, and you're just improving on the gig straight up, right?
Yeah, for sure. I tend to leave a lot of improv to solos. I like to improvise solos and trying to get better at that every time I try. And improving on what's called the comping of rhythm and chords, and adding extensions and sevens and nines to just normal major and minor chords. I sort of play around with that as I go. It keeps it fun. Keeps it.
Yeah.
It is interesting and fun anyway, but it adds a little extra depth to the music and a challenge to myself. And
so that was kind of covering cover bands and stuff like that. What about when you work with an artist who's written an original and they ask you to come in on either record or play live piano part? Like, what's your process for getting that in your head and understanding what the songwriter is trying to achieve? Do you have a discussion with them? Do you work out what they want to hear from it? Do they give you just creative freedom? What usually happens?
Yeah, what I'll typically do as I'm approaching, say, the first session with a new artist, there'll always be rehearsals beforehand. So they'll send me. Usually, what happens is they'll send me a bunch of audio files. I will then listen to them, and I'll still chart out the music just like I would for a cover gig. Just to have that in the database in case it's a recurring gig. And then I will learn solos usually, but as the next sort of step is in the rehearsals, I will sort of liaise with the artists and the other musicians in the room and go, right, is this right, is this wrong, what do you want out of the music, what do you want it to sound like? That will be for like whether you want the solos to be exactly like the record or even the rest of the sort of harmonic playing.
Okay, so it's live. So let's go to the recording process. I know you've at least done one, or you've recorded an EP with a band you've got, a bunch of guys together. I know you've been in the studio, and I know you've done some individual projects for people you had never met before, and you went up, to their studios and did some stuff. Tell us how different it is doing those recording projects as opposed to live when you're doing them.
The big, most salient difference is your perfections are thrown back in your face. Imperfections, sorry. Your imperfections are thrown back in your face. At a live gig, you play the song, and if you mess up, hit a wrong note here and there, whatever, it'll probably get lost a lot of the sound. And generally, unless someone's got a very, very keen ear, they won't notice. And then you just don't do it again the next time. Whereas for a recording, even if you don't do it the next time, it'll still be there, and it'll be played back, and you've got to then re-record. Hopefully not entire parts. Sometimes you can just punch in certain sections and just redo that. But yeah, it just means all the mistakes that you make are very, very obvious.
Yeah, right. So when you're first doing this for recording, let's talk about we won't mention names, but the recording you did up at Rutherford for a guy's original music. How much creative freedom did you get on the keyboard part that he wanted you to play for that? Did you get to change it? Did you basically have to play the vanilla thing that he wanted? How did you work that out with him?
Yeah, that was a similar thing to the rehearsals, just that consulting, kind of working with the artist. It is his song, it is not my song, but sometimes given my experience on piano, if they don't have as much, I can offer something as a piano player would play it.
So you do get a bit of creative freedom, right?
It depends on the artist. This particular project, I got a fair bit of creative freedom actually, because he was very willing to open it up to my interpretation, because he doesn't play piano. He's a guitarist and a singer. So he previously recorded some basic parts to sort of get the skeleton of what he wanted, and then I was able to add my flourishes and little bits here and there and pull the part in and out of the mix, sort of as I'm playing, as I deemed fit for the music, which was cool.
Yeah, no, excellent, mate. It's good when you get that creative freedom, I suppose. You get to do a little bit, within reason too, because you've got to respect that the songwriter has a particular vision, and that's what they're going for, and you're delivering on that as a session musician, because, like you said, it's not your song. So, and is that typical of the band you're in as well?
Yeah, a lot of I'll stick to. Yeah, with the band, there's been a mix of taking parts that other members of the band have written, and then me just doing that, and then bits of me going, hey, what's this? This is a cool idea I've had. Or there's some songs that are unreleased at the moment that I've written keyboard parts for, and then some of them that are released that I've either written with people, or they've gone, hey, we really like this. Can you do this? Can you just
deliver on it? Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I'm totally fine to do all of that.
So how do you feel collaboration and collaborative effort really does make the best music, right? That's what I'm hearing, right? Having the ability to work with the artist, work with the band, work with the other members, and come up with what sounds the best is really the core of a session musician, right?
Yeah, that's hard. Like there's the idea of many hands make light work. In sort of this process, I think of it as sort of many minds make light work in a way. Having multiple different perspectives and minds on a creative project definitely refines it much better. Yeah,
cool. All right, so let's turn our heads to when you're actually doing that recording. Let's talk remotely. I know you did one remotely. Let's talk about how did you go about that? Did you what tools did you use? Did you end up doing part of the mixing?
I did some remote recording for a project that involved just me sort of delivering raw stems, just playing piano into a computer, a Mac with Logic, and then exporting it at the right quality for him then to upload and form into his mix. There's no sort of processing that I do as a session musician, because I deliver the raw audio that they want recorded, and then they make the creative production decisions on the other end. So outside of maybe a bit of cleaning up and chopping up and like the punching in certain sections, fixing things up, it should all just be straight piano or straight synthesizer or what I'm doing. I'm not adding effects.
Yeah, right. So just delivering the raw audio in the right format for them to import and then do mixing and mastering somewhere else.
Yeah, usually a WAV format. Because it's the highest quality.
Yeah, not the compressed.
Yeah, MP3s are a bit compressed.
Yeah, fair enough. So, what would be your biggest piece of advice for bands looking to integrate session musicians into, or recording artists pushing session musicians into their recording? What do you guys need? I guess the question is, what do you guys need as session musicians to make it flow the best?
Okay, yeah. The best flow, I guess everyone's different. It's kind of, given that we're basically contractors and sort of sole traders, everyone would be different. I think from my experience, being able to collaborate and having my voice heard on a song, even if the artist turns around and goes, nope, I don't want that for my song, can we do what I want?
Yep.
So having your voice heard, knowing that you can make suggestions is, given your experience, is really important, really powerful. Even if that decision isn't what ends up sort of being the final product, that's okay. It's about being able to bounce ideas off each other. There are some sessions I'll be happy to just do. If I guess that's a part of laying out the details from the start as well. If you're trying to hire a session musician and you go, right, I just need you to play exactly this, just you can play it better than I can.
Yep.
Then that's cool. Or if you tell me I'm open to do some collaboration and some working on the parts over the course of the day, then that's cool too. I guess if you set that out from the start, it'll be much easier, because then you won't get someone that's expecting something exact to start writing, or someone that likes writing with you to do something exact.
And you talk about agreeing up front, and I totally agree. Comms and communication and agreements up front would be key to getting the right result and outcome. Do you get those written down, or is it generally just a gentleman's agreement? Is it done on an email? Do you actually document these agreements, or you don't really at your stage? Because I know you're only new into the session musicians.
Yeah, a lot of things happen. It is documented, but not sort of formally contracted.
Yep.
If that makes sense. There's no contracts. There's a lot of, depending on how you communicate, I tend to chuck a lot of things, especially if it's quite official, through an email account.
Yep.
Otherwise, a lot of the industry, as I've seen it, is like Facebook Messenger, Instagram, like just these normal messaging services. Yeah. Because people have got music pages and business pages. I do too. It's and they've got artist pages that they'll message from out of that, and then for them everything's centralized, all the gig information with all the posts with all the this and that, and it's quite helpful for that. And then I just like to chuck things through emails as well. And
that's interesting you mentioned that, because industry collaboration and stuff is really important for a session musician. So how do you go about marketing yourself as a session musician? Like, I know you've been up with a few, it's been through social media. Do you make any active efforts to go on social market? What would your advice be for other session musicians?
My advice would be do it better than I do.
Fair enough.
I just don't do it as much as I should. From a business perspective, a lot of, as part of what we learned in uni as well, is tailoring to what audience you need. So as a session musician, you'll be marketing out to artists and to maybe venue managers if you're doing piano bar type work, or engineers, recording engineers and studios, so that you can be kind of one of their guys that they pull in. So learning where people are on the internet, in the age of the internet, where people are in that space is important. So I find a lot of the traffic goes through Instagram at the moment. Out of all the sort of channels of communication that I have, I get the most messages on Instagram, and Instagram can be centralized as well, because the connection with Facebook can tie it to a Facebook account, so people can message you there, and then you can also, on a business page, add a button so they can click to access your email account and email you from there. So it's actually quite good as kind of a central hub. However, I do know a lot of people like to run, particularly artists, run that then through to a website as their central location for all their information. And I imagine that's quite a good idea. I just haven't done it personally.
Yeah, cool. So what's the one thing you wish more artists understood about working with session musicians? If there was one thing you can narrow it down to, what's the biggest bugbear? What's the hardest thing to get over? What do you want them to know?
Biggest bugbear. I guess thankfully I was going to say I haven't had much experience. Maybe I just blotted it out of my mind a bit. Just, I feel like it's similar to anyone else. Just be nice. Don't be rude. Don't be a terrible person. I like to say that a lot of a musician's job is sort of the relational stuff and being able to, the people, working with people, and then some of it is actually being able to play the music, weirdly enough, and that's when you get into all sorts of networking and things as well. And that, don't be rude, please.
Great advice, mate. Look, one final question before I'm going to get you to let the listeners know about your Instagram, etc. Final advice. What advice would you give to musicians just starting out as session musos or with bands in 2025?
Sorry, again.
What advice would you give to musos starting out as session musicians in 2025 right now?
Oh, right. Get as good at your craft as you can. You need to be versatile. A lot of what I did while studying at uni is trying to learn how to play at least at a good foundational level in every genre that I possibly could. And it is totally cool to specialize in certain genres. I particularly love jazz fusion. But being able to play anything, because if you want to do more gigs, you got to opening up your skills to do all different kinds of gigs is very important. So you're not kind of locked into one type of music and one type of genre, and you can work with anyone and everyone. And then just meet as many people as you can and keep slogging through the gigs, even if they're unpaid, because that becomes your network. And what I've had is playing gigs with all sorts of artists, and then the guitarist of the support band behind us went, "Oh, actually, can I use this on this project?" And then someone on that project will go, "Actually, I need some keyboards on this personal project that I'm doing." And you never know where it's going to lead. Just meet more and more and more people, save their Instagrams, their numbers, whatever.
Same as in business, mate. All networking. Networking is key, communication is key, and stuff like that. All right, Dylan, thanks for that advice, mate. Really appreciate you spending the time with Soundz Unleashed. For anybody who wants to contact Dylan for a session work or anything else, it's at Dylan James Music. Is that right? Your Instagram?
Yeah, Dylan.jamesmusic on Instagram. That's, as I said, that's a central sort of point for everything that I do.
Yep. All right. Thank you. In each episode, we try to highlight a featured artist, an independent artist or a band, and today's contender is a local Sydney-based singer-songwriter, Ben Harris, from Sydney's Northern Beaches. Ben has released 5 self-recorded singles in his debut EP Homesick, which came out in 2025. Ben studied music in Sydney at Sydney's JMC Academy and states he was lucky enough to have been mentored by Rick Grossman, the bass player with both the Divinals and the Hoodoo Gurus, and a 2-time ARIA Hall of Famer. Ben is also the bass player for an emerging indie rock outfit named Aphrodisiac, featured in our first podcast episode, and fellow band member to Dylan and Oscar and Phoenix and Zane. Ben's music is heavily influenced by global pop artists Miles Smith, Alex Warren, Noah Kahan, and more subtly influenced by Indian rock artists like Lime Cordiale and Arctic Monkeys. He writes melody-driven indie pop songs that navigate his personal experiences in an attempt to relate to and connect with his audience. You'll find Ben gigging regularly in local venues right across Sydney, New South Wales. Ben's EP Homesick is out now on all streaming platforms, and further details are on his website at benharrismusic.com.au. He's on all social media platforms, so go take a look and give his music a listen. My personal favourite is Won't Go Back, about a turning point in Ben's life when he finally found his path in life through music. Thanks for listening, and we here at Soundz Unleashed appreciate your continued support. We're hopefully in our next episode to be discussing the songwriting and music creation process and chatting with a songwriter about their writing process and how they go about designing their song from the ground up. We hope you enjoyed the content, and please subscribe to our podcast on Spotify Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Overcast and other platforms. Please also follow Soundz on all our social media and YouTube. One final thing. We need your support again to continue our sponsorship program. This requires us to sell music equipment and accessories through our retail arm, Soundz Music and Audio. Please check out our Soundz store at Soundz with a Z, OZSOUNDZ.com.au, and grab your deal on your next set of guitar strings, drumsticks, audio cables and more. Soundz Unleashed is available on all podcast platforms, and our links are all in our Linktree at linktree/OzSoundz. We hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we will see you in November for the next episode.